All right, I'm gonna get the live stream upload right quick. All right, the Shock Exchange. I'm here with Mr. Mitchell, of course, and this is Trump and the G. Is that Trump or John Wayne? So it's been a lot going on over the past week or so, and everybody knows former President Donald Trump was shot at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania last weekend. When I was watching on Twitter, and I wasn't sure if it was real or not because I was curious how someone could find high ground for one at a campaign rally, and then I was watching the crowd. The crowd didn't seem to react that much to someone getting shot because they missed Trump. Then why wouldn't someone in the crowd get shot? That's what I was looking at first. So I waited a while to figure out if it was real or not, but apparently it was real. And Trump got up and put his fist in the air and said, "Fight, fight," which sort of had his John Wayne steez on there because he's also always had this image of being John Wayne, a tough guy. Same with Ronald Reagan, and it wasn't just an act. It was purely he really is a tough guy because when you get shot in the ear and you stand up and you say fight, and then you go golfing the next day, and then you also keep your campaign schedule. I guess that makes you a pretty tough guy. For those who don't know John Wayne, young people, cowboy in the movies, and he always shot these Indians, but he never got shot. And it was almost like fantastical. How can anybody be this tough? But apparently John Wayne is alive, and Trump is not just it's not just an act. So it was sort of surreal that something like that could happen in the United States, but it happened, and we came this close to anarchy in this country. So I'll let Mr. Mitchell give his take on the goings on in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean it was like you said, I think I came across it on social media as well. The first time I came across it, and I think much in the same way, I initially questioned the authenticity of it because one with our ever evolving realistic videos that AI can generate, and along with misleading headlines and disinformation campaigns going out. We live in a world where you really do have to question everything, and unfortunately, but that is the space that we live in. Before just diving out in support of or against something, due diligence is definitely required. So, much in the same way, just saw that it did actually happen. By the plethora of news sources, and at least for that 48 hours, it was just on a constant loop. So I think my response, I wasn't particularly paying attention to the crowd initially. So, I didn't stick my tinfoil hat on and rabbit ears on at that particular moment. But it did, but I think in some way I did, just from a slightly different perspective, just looking at Trump's particularly reaction, where it wasn't essentially a full-on duck. It's interesting that you mentioned Reagan, and when we think about Reagan and his assassination attempt, and even the people around Reagan, there was I think what we would expect as a natural response to unknown gunfire, especially when you're uncertain of the direction that it's coming from, the target, and certainly your proximity as hopefully the non-target, right? That you don't want to end up as cannon fodder. And most people duck and cover. Right? Completely ducked and covered, even after being hit. But Trump not so much. Trump not so. I think that's where I began putting on my tinfoil hat, and the subsequent days where images and slow motions of the crowd and the reactions of even I think two or three of the people directly behind Trump, which I did find interesting. Definitely found interesting. Whether diving down the conspiratorial rabbit hole or not, it certainly makes you question, right? But I'm sure we'll get into all of that. But yeah, that was just my first reaction was that regardless of whether this is real or staged, Trump has secured the U.S. presidency as we know it. That was actually my knee jerk reaction after essentially finding out that this thing is real, and I thought it was a particularly well placed chess move either way, whether real or staged. At the end of the day, and I even posted so when Trump pumped his fist and said fight fight, the American flag was waving like amber waves of grain behind him. And I said, that's a particularly familiar image. And the first thing that came to mind is the raising of the flag at Iwo Jima, which, every Marine, whether, active duty or veteran, every single Marine knows the image of raising the flag at Iwo Jima. And to me, I couldn't help but notice the strong similarities, even in the symbolism. And I certainly don't think, again, whether real or staged, that that symbolism was coincidental. Okay. I think it was purposely meant to galvanize even those that sit on the fence. Maybe the broader population at large, especially maybe younger millennials, certainly Gen Z, that are eligible to vote. And the images of Iwo Jima may not be all that familiar, right? They may not even know what Iwo Jima is. However, to a certain demographic, right? I think arguably Gen X, baby boomers, Iwo Jima is imprinted. I think even at mention of Iwo Jima, there's probably a mental image that comes up. So, and that image is the raising of the flag typically. So, I think that the symbolism was certainly meant to trigger a certain memory, all right, and to essentially associate this assassination attempt and Trump's survival with the same symbolism that the Marines had at Iwo Jima.
Okay, I mean, Gen Z people have, Gen Z has seen the symbol, even if they don't know what they're looking at. Even if they didn't know they were looking at it, they probably seen it. But I mean, it was an iconic photo. I mean, him standing up, holding his fist up, and the Secret Service people around him, and it's going to be circulated for a while. He definitely had his John Wayne steeds on. The tough guy image. That's only a tough guy could do that. I mean, I think get shot at, get earshot, and then stand up. There was no reason for him to stage something like that anyway, because he was already leading in the polls, and he'd already made Joe Biden look weak in the previous debate. So there was no reason for him to stage anything. The improbable or almost impossible, we're finding out that their details of how it happened. That they said this kid Crow, apparently a alleged shooter, like a nerd. They said he walked a mile with a ladder, a gun, and a scope, rangefinder. Walked a mile towards the rally, and nobody stopped him, asked him where you going with the ladder. I mean, it's like almost unbelievable that he could get into the rally or get up onto a building, one of the places that had high ground and a direct line towards the president, line of sight towards the president, and it wasn't covered. But anyway, we'll get into that later. But as far as Trump's tough guy image, it's been brandished now. And he had that image when he was in office. You look at some of the things he did. He took on I wouldn't say he took on Russia, but there was no skirmishes with Russia and the Ukraine. He took on NATO. He questioned whether we need to be in NATO. Who does that? He took on the Federal Reserve while you're hiking rates. Right. He took on China, had a trade war with China. Who does that? Who takes on China like that? He took on, on social media. He took on Twitter, Facebook. He took on the bans. He took on the media. He basically bypassed the media and tweeted his pronouncements or tweeted his policy, and everybody got the news at the same time. So, the state didn't like that at all. They were out to get Trump. They didn't like that at all, and so they've been antagonizing Trump the whole time he was in office. He took on all the naysayers about the impeachment. Yeah, he was impeached twice. The Russians won the election. He took on. He faced all the indictments. January 6th inquiry, so on and so forth. So he's not an act. This guy's a real tough guy. A lot of people have quit already. And we had his pollster John McLaughlin on here a few times on Trump and the G. He said that in polls that the president's main job is to keep the country safe. That's what the public wants. And he kept the country out of wars while he was in office, even though a lot of Negro whispers said he would get us into a war, but the facts didn't meet the narrative. And now you have a president who looks strong, looks virile, unlike the president we had previously. And I think that's important. It's important when you're dealing with all these different factions around the world, whether it's in the Middle East, North Korea, Russia, China, Ukraine, what have you. It's important for not only the president to appear tough, but to be tough. And so he definitely sealed the next presidential. He's going to definitely be the next president of the United States. After that picture came out, we have a president who can get shot at and survive, where the current president can't survive COVID. So that image and his persona after having gotten shot and gone golfing and kept his campaign schedule, saying they're not going to intimidate me. I think that sent a message to American people and also around the world that the U.S. is still tough, even though we have we're crumbling internally. At least we do have strong leadership in Trump. So that's my take on just the image of him, of his toughness, and it's definitely something the U.S. needs right now because we look weak around the world, in my opinion. And you see all these skirmishes around the world while we crumble internally and fight ourselves internally.
Well, I think I agree with the sentiments, but I think much like GW, obviously 9/11 happened under GW's watch, irrespective of the response that we had after 9/11, which was pretty much shock and awe. I think as far as his legacy and the seriousness at which people took GW, I kind of liken it to Trump, where there was always a joke right around the corner, right? There was GW was the butt of SNL jokes for his entire tenure as presidency. Certainly Democrats and liberals, progressives alike. Um, whether it was his level of intelligence, whether it was his inability to recall, common idioms, and to be able to communicate without always stumbling over himself or putting his foot in his mouth, or getting a sandal thrown at him, or there was he was always found himself at the butt of a joke, right? So although um, he on the other side of it, you had this image that was quite often parroted that, he's the president that, you can sit down and have a beer with, right?
Right, right.
He was the everyman's president, and so much so that even after, um, Obama got into office, him and Michelle had this, uh, unlikely, the odd couple friendship almost, right? Like, but my point is that, much like GW, Trump found himself at the butt of jokes, right? Every, uh, almost the same jokes, right? Right. So I think in a lot of ways, even his hubris, frankly, turned into a joke. It was not. In my opinion, I don't think Trump was ever heralded as a tough guy. Um, it kind of reminds me of that. That saying. It's like, are you brave or are you just stupid? Right? And I think a lot of folks looked at his brazen, even with going to war, having a tariff war, economic war with China, going after Mexico and essentially telling Mexico that they're going to pay for the wall, going after NAFTA agreement, going after essentially imports, and making sure that a trade balance indeed favored the U.S. Each one of those acts were often, at least in mainstream media, were often labeled as just brazen and reckless. In a lot of ways, just plainly stupid. And it's almost like, well, this is the punishment that we get for voting in a reality TV star who, I think, was better known to play it up for the cameras than the reality, right, of what he actually portrayed. There's always this disconnect between what Trump actually represented and what the public thinks that Trump perceived himself as. Like, I think if you ask Trump, am I John Wayne? Absolutely. There's no question in his mind that he's John Wayne. But in the public's mind, he was lucky, or it had to be staged, or you know what I mean? Like, in other words, that credit for being the tough guy just largely was not supported during his time as president. So I think, in some ways, even coming off of the back of the first debate, although it was clear, Democrats did not support Joe Biden. As we saw Obama, in his typical shifty way, can't ever just say the thing to someone's face, right? Like, Obama back channeled and ensured that his lack of support for Biden was pronounced from the back channeling, as opposed to him just coming out and saying, "Hey, I don't support Joe Biden for president," or I want him to step down. Like,
But
in other words,
even if he said, even if
man
Obama,
up.
but even if Obama said it to Joe Biden's face, something like that, he would say it in a way that's so mealy mouthed that he would equivocate
Yeah,
to the point
yeah,
where it could
yeah,
be
yeah,
received
yeah.
5 different ways. So, you know what I'm saying? He thinks he's saying it
Right. No,
directly, and we're
absolutely,
like,
absolutely, and that's my
what did he just say?
right. That's exactly the point, right? That he, but essentially, ultimately, that we find out that over that time, Joe Biden's support internally was dropping heavier than an Acme anchor on Wile E. Coyote's head. So it's so the as a result of that, there was still some question of Trump's competency, though. It wasn't just, at least I don't think that it was a complete free and clear ride for Trump, although Biden, the essentially floor, the bottom dropped out from under his feet. There's still a question mark of, well, who would the replacement be if not Biden, right? And I think the natural kind of thought would obviously be vice president, Kamala Harris, but potentially someone else along those lines. Obviously younger, obviously meant to, I think, kind of galvanize more than one voter base, right? Much the same way that Kamala plays up her identity politics, in other words, right? She touches Indian Americans. She falsely touches Black Americans. She touches working women. She touches women. She touches, so in other words, this multi identity politic approach. So whether it was Kamala or someone else, I think it was going to be along the same vein, in other words. And I think that, something this drastic had to have happened to really solidify in the public's mind, in other words, right? And I think it was again, whether real or staged, I think it was a brilliant move, simply because you force the other side to now advocate for your survival. Because what is the first thing that Biden's PR team did? Because we all know Biden doesn't know how to tweet. So the first thing that they did was denounced political violence and showed support in terms of opening an independent investigation for who was going after Trump and what was the failure in security, etc. So in other words, for that moment, you have your opposition publicly having your back. You know what I mean? Right. So I think, either way, but, just to essentially say or speak to the tough guy image. I think it is there, but, there was certainly, during his 4 years, there was certainly a lot of opposition to that. And I think that this particular act solidified better than any single act or even the combination of all the things that he accomplished under his 4 years. This single event put a stamp on it in a way that nothing he's done previously would have gotten this type of support and that type of imaging in people's minds.
Okay. That's a fair point. I think that's I guess there's a disconnect between what's real and what the media was saying, because when he was in office, the media said a lot of stuff. The media said the Russians won the election. The media said, and media and Democrats got him impeached twice. Right. Said he was a nut for tweeting. He didn't look presidential for tweeting his messages to the public. Of course, he's not going to look presidential to the Washington Post and New York Times because they can't make money when the public gets information at the same pace they get it. So he hurt a lot of careers. And then you have people saying he was deranged. He's going to get us into a war, which is, maybe they didn't say he was tough, but they said he was unhinged. And so he's tweeting about Rocket Boy. Rocket Boy launched another rocket yesterday from North Korea. Who does that? Rocket Boy launched another rocket. We'll blow him into oblivion. I'm going to blow Rocket Boy off the map. And people go, oh my God, he's going to get us into World War III. And because he was such a nut, and seemed like he was definitely capable of going to World War III, I think that deterred a lot of I think it kept the country safe in a roundabout way. How about that? And so what people...
Being the wild card.
Right, there's the reality, then there's the messaging from the media, and I call it Negro whispers. If you got black people in the media, including Joanne Reed, who's tweeting all day long about Trump's unhinged, Trump's getting to World War III, Trump doesn't look presidential, it just becomes like almost a reality. If people just keep like in Germany, Nazi Germany, they kept saying you repeat the simple messaging regularly, people are going to start to believe it. Same thing with when Trump was in office. This messaging why he's unhinged, the Russians won the election, he's going to get into World War III. He doesn't look presidential, so on and so forth. So there's the reality, then there's, what the media was saying. And so when he left office, you can see a dichotomy between Trump and what happened when he was in office versus Biden when he was in office, where now you got China talking about taking over Taiwan. You got Russia entering the Ukraine. You got skirmishes in the Middle East that just didn't happen when Trump was in office. So whether Trump looked unconventional or not, the reality is that we were safer, the world was safer when he was in office. And so that's the reality, and that's what the media keeps reporting. And if up to the corporate media and the left, Trump's never going to be a tough guy, if that makes sense. But I'm saying the things that he did, just the fact pattern of him starting a trade war with China, saying you're not going to keep stealing our intellectual property from our tech companies. Tweets about Rocket Boy. All of a sudden, the rocket stopped from North Korea. Challenging NATO. Challenging the fifth estate. Who challenges the corporate media? By tweeting directly to the public. Who does that? That's like a death knell for any politician. Every politician, of course, the media, but not Trump. You know what I'm saying? So I think that point what I'm saying. Reality, he was actually tough. But if you listen to the Negro whispers, he's never going to be tough. He's never going to be presidential. They always got something to say about this guy. Almost to the point where it's gotten silly now. But I think there was a watershed moment last weekend where now I think it's clear. I think the rest of the world can, even the man on the street can see that from the beginning, this assassination attempt didn't just happen out of the clear blue sky. In my opinion, the stage was set by several different actors. From the beginning, when Obama was investigating, I heard Obama was tapping Trump's phones when he became a legitimate presidential candidate. Before he was even elected, Obama was spying on him in the White House, tapping his phone. Hillary was creating this Russia connection. She created a Russia connection. And the Russia coalition between Trump to get him elected, so on and so forth. She created that. I understand that Donald Browser was giving Hillary the interview questions when they were debating. All the talk about the Russians got Trump elected. From first I heard about it was from John Lewis, and the media kept going on and on. Nobody ever apologized to Trump. Then impeached him twice, and then you have now when he was asking. Then all of a sudden he created an insurrection, which we already went over on the show. Trump created insurrection. He made a bunch of white guys do what white guys do. It's my country. I'm gonna take it over. He made them do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
He was asking for they were telling him he couldn't get the Biden administration was denying him extra Secret Service support.
Security.
Extra. Was denying him extra security. The former president can't get extra security. Zelensky got more security than Trump has. Former President Obama has more security than Trump has. Obama's not even in the public eye like that anymore. And then I understand that there was I can't think of the guy's name, a congressman from Mississippi was saying that Trump shouldn't get extra security because he's been indicted. What's that got to do with anything? He's just saying stuff. You know what I mean? He's been indicted, so he shouldn't get extra security from the Secret Service. Why? And then after he got shot, a lady who worked for him on his staff said that, I can't think of the gentleman's name, but the lady who worked on his staff said she saw the guy couldn't shoot better. So I think that before Trump got shot and after he got shot, all of a sudden, a lot of people are real silent. A lot of people haven't been on Twitter as much. All this stuff about Trump's a racist, Trump this, Trump that, is all stopped now. Stand on it. You know what I'm saying? Stand on it. You had all this mouth when Trump was in office, and you kept on. You were having fun with the silliness. Now he's been shot. Stand on it. Why are you so quiet now? I heard MSNBC canceled Morning Joe on the following Monday morning. I guess they were afraid they would say something stupid. They were so pro-Democrat. So there are a lot of people real quiet now who don't have that same energy after Trump got shot. Who, in my opinion, a lot of people actors who create this environment, I'm saying they caused it, but I'm saying a lot of people created this environment that for someone to take a shot at Trump and for some little 20-year-old to be radicalized and think Trump's the Antichrist. And now we look, as a country, I think we look just like any other country, that you basically have these departments. In my opinion, you have these departments, the Secret Service, the FBI, CIA, who in their own little fiefdom, and they think they run the country. And you may have people in these organizations in the Secret Service or the FBI or CIA who've been there longer than presidents, who think they can't be told what to do. So I just think it's we look like any other country now where you have the deepest state or power that be who are power hungry, and they think that removal of Trump is in their best interest or in the best interest of the country, and they don't know how close we came to anarchy or to civil war. Thank God he didn't get seriously hurt, because we all probably have to wear MAGA hats to keep from getting attacked. So that's my thing. I think a lot of actors created the environment for this event to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken to that. I mean, countless times. I feel like, essentially, with liberals, just elitism. Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to. Liberals and Democrats have this very elitist approach. Even Van Jones. I can't keep count how many times he breaks down and cries on the Crying Negro Network, as they're calling it now, CNN. So I forget if it was number 1 or 2, but during one of his crying sessions, he spoke to the elitism of the Democratic Party. He admonished the Democratic Party for failing to have the ability to reach across the aisle, failing to have the ability to create bridges, failing to have the ability to bring in people that did not particularly think like them, but failing to find the common ground and building on top of that common ground. And I think it was, I believe it was Trump's,
Mr. Mitchell, on that point though, right? It was the constant talking about Biden can't reach across the aisle while we should have replaced Trump, right? When the people saying it before Biden got elected,
right? He
can't reach across the aisle.
Yeah.
And my point, did Van Jones ever call out? Did he ever call, not just Democrats? Did he ever call out other members of the media for this basically outright lies?
You know what? I think he actually held essentially the entire ecosystem responsible. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe he did even put himself in that category of failing to do just that, what he was admonishing, because he recognized that even himself had a role in creating that environment where people feel this us versus them. They feel ostracized. Oh, now now that Trump is in power, you know, and I believe it was the election night. If I may be mistaken, but I believe it was Trump's election, the election night or the night after, where Van Jones was breaking down crying because Hillary didn't get elected.
Yeah, he said, "Yeah, this is the white last thing of America," right?
To your question, right, right. But to your point though, there was an acknowledgement of that an environment was created where bridges were not built, people feel ostracized, and now that creates this us versus them mentality. I think for the far right, there isn't a bridge. There isn't a coming together moment. But I don't know how much of the far right represents conservative voters. Like, what percentage of conservative voters identify as far right, or even if they're not a card carrying member of the Tea Party or Citizens United or Proud Boys, or the plethora of them that have come out since Trump was in office. But even just the aligning of the messages and principles that the far right was promoting, I don't know how much of what that percentage of conservatives are that even identify right with the talking points of the far right. So even if they aren't card carrying members per se, but they do align with the messaging, right? They do get behind the political intent. So I don't know, but I will say that for those that I think were open to walking across a bridge, right? Because it has to be a two-way street. One party alone can't, leave the doors and the arms open to having shared political interest, and the other party just completely close off, right? So I'm really speaking to the folks that are pliable in the sense that they are willing to come across a bridge. They are willing to build on shared political interests, even though they are in an opposing party, right? So and not just limited to conservatives, because there were some progressives that voted for Trump as well. There were some conservatives that voted for Obama, right? There were some Republicans that, for the first time in their life, on Obama's first term, that voted for a Democrat, and certainly a Democratic president. So, those are the folks that essentially I'm speaking to, where if you make even those folks feel ostracized and as if there's no opportunity to build on a shared interest, well, then you do create this environment of an us versus them. And people are just going to dig their heels in. And that's what we watched for 4 years. Folks dig their heels in. So even when Biden came into office, I think that there was less kind of steam. If we look at, for example, if we look at Trump's first year, in, right? We saw a significant rise of far right movements, organizations, white nationalists, feeling galvanized and vindicated, frankly. When we compare that to his last year going out, you saw less movements. You saw less participation. You saw less support from the Republican Party. You saw less support from conservatives as well. So I think some of the steam ran out, and we've spoken to this on the show before, and I think largely because Trump ended up alienating that part of his voter base, and I think where he alienated was jobs. Even starting with the auto manufacturing jobs in Ohio that he was supposed to save, and then I think 2 weeks later or 2 months later, ended up outsourcing those jobs anyhow. So I think he ended up alienating part of the voter base, and I think that's why we watched some of the steam be let out from some of these groups. So by the time Biden got into office, there was less of this heel digging and staunch positioning by conservatives. However, it's still. However, I think Biden still dropped ball because arguably he was worse in his efficacy. He was worse than Trump, right? We did get into trade wars. We effectively kicked off World War III under Biden's watch. Although there are some, I'm noticing a lot of folks saying that the economy is the best economy in decades. Personally, I refute that, but I do understand the bright spots in which folks are talking about within the economy. But is this the best economy that we've had in decades? Is this the lowest unemployment that we've had in decades? I don't fully agree with that. I strongly feel like Biden dropped the ball, in other words, and it essentially added to the conservative frustration, added to Republican frustration, and almost re-galvanized the us versus them. I think the share, ironically, the thing that Biden did accomplish is that Democrats and Republicans alike could come together on the fact that Biden sucked. So I guess he did accomplish that much. But it certainly, I think it does leave the door open for Trump to step back in a stronger position, all in all.
Yeah, I think whether Trump gets elected or Biden gets elected, it's almost like it's almost like a game to a lot of these people, where it's almost like rearranging decks on the Titanic. The Democrats have to win for whatever reason. You know what I mean? Or according to some people, Trump, Biden's going to reach across the aisle. The stuff they were saying didn't make any sense, and none really came to fruition, really.
Yeah.
I guess I keep, maybe I'm being naive. I keep worrying about democracy, worrying about the country. All this back and forth, we're tearing the country apart, and we're weakening the country. And we're definitely weakening the country, and we're definitely losing standing in the world, and that's not good for the country. That we are destroying a country that was built by people who came before us, with all this bickering and all these games and whatever. And I'm curious whether, particularly sensitive to what we call a Negro whisperer, constantly tweeting about Trump, constantly tweeting about the Russian collusion, constantly tweeting about Trump is racist. I wonder if a lot of these people are going to be quiet going forward. I'm curious about how aggressive they're going to be going forward when Trump becomes the president. Are they going to tone a lot of that down? Because at some point it's just noise, and I think the reality is that this assassination attempt of Trump has almost, particularly from African American perspective, galvanized even more black folks, and rally even more black folks around Trump. Like, come on, leave this guy alone. I mean, how much you gonna do to this guy? I mean, Trump is so maligned that Marion Barry is somewhere right now taking pictures of him. Because it's almost it's gotten ridiculous. I don't know how, and it's almost like now you just got people just like we look like it's like a joke that you have people who have big platforms who just saying stuff with no evidence and just almost like making stuff up. I mean, you see Joanne Reed on MSNBC just keep talking in circles about Biden has COVID. Doesn't he look as strong as Trump? Is Trump going to use this this assassination attempt and to humanize himself in front of the public? What's wrong? I mean, and it's like these institutions of ours. I think it showed how institutions of ours and the corporate media, the Democratic Party, I think to somewhat even I wouldn't say the courts, but the regulators, like the people who, like the lawmakers, like whether it's DAs or attorneys general, show how corrupt they are and the breakdown of our institutions. And I think it's not only made the U.S. look bad, but I think it exposed some fissures where now you have everything's been politicized, whether it's the corporate media or certain lawmakers, and it's not good for the country, in my opinion.
No, that's even kind of circling back to your point about the deep state, and this fracturing that really we're watching in front of our eyes, and offline we've certainly spoken to it. Hold on, give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. But I was saying that going back to the kind of circling back to the fracturing and potentially the power grabbing of the deep state. I think one of the things that we're noticing, and it's purely my opinion, and some of it is conjecture. Because I don't have all the evidence to support it, but definitely noticing some patterns from the previous election where we're watching, and let me preface it to say that I think it is all linked. In other words, where we are seeing messaging recycling, for example, even the identity politics of Kamala. I don't think that is coincidental at all that this is a second go round, and the biggest issue that is being discussed amongst black folks, certainly online, and spilling over offline, including the Negro Whisperers, is whether Kamala is black. In my opinion, I think that is a deep state propaganda tool, frankly. I think that it is an intentional distractor to every group or individuals that are attempting to steer the discussion around policy and what are the policy demands What are we getting in exchange for our votes? Uh, it is being intentionally redirected back into identity politics, the demonizing of black male voters. Already, the exact same playbook, the exact same talking points from 2016 are resurfacing again. And I think that it is an intentional propaganda tool. Like for example, even in connection with the deep state, we had what is this guy's Joey Mananarino being exposed. I don't know if you saw that, where his alternate identity on Twitter is a middle-aged black woman, and I guess homeboy forgot to log out of his his actual Twitter account as Joey, and started tweeting as his middle-aged black woman alternate identity. Talking about his mama black, his daddy black, he been black his whole life, and he's gonna vote, or she's gonna vote for Trump. Dot 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 dot. It's these type of it's these type of actors, literal actors, that I think are being propped up. Certainly some folks are going to jump out of that window unprovoked and unpaid. No one had a conversation with them. No one sent them to carry anybody's water. But they want to jump out of that window, maybe because for attention, or they feel that they want to support their candidate by any means necessary. But it is my belief that a lot of these folks with larger platforms, I'll even call out one like Ebro from Ebro in the Morning. Was just on Twitter not too long ago. Again, in response to an individual that was criticizing Kamala's policies. A part of that critique was her usage of her identity politics as a convenience, as a way into the black community by leveraging an identity that is not hers. And let me be clear as well. Kamala is not black. She's not. Her father, and I challenge anybody to show me where her father, as a Jamaican, has ever identified as a black Jamaican or an Afro Jamaican. He has specifically identified his Irish and his slave owning ancestry. He has publicly identified as such. I challenge anyone to find evidence of Mr. Harris ever identifying as a black man.
Yeah, but you're trying to use logic and reason. But Mr. Mitchell, you've been a jerk, right? Because you're using logic and reason and facts to make an argument.
Well,
you're not supposed to do that because people,
point, right?
But people be screaming chucks and pearls shortly when
right, and that's what right. That's what we saw, and my whole point is that the gentleman that Ebro was responding to, the identity politics portion was the smallest piece of the argument that was being made. And it was being made to show that here's an individual who is leveraging an identity that is not theirs in order to galvanize votes, although they have specifically, meaning Kamala has specifically pledged allegiance to AIPAC, has specifically pledged allegiance to Israel, has specifically pledged allegiance to the Asian community by way of support of an anti-Asian hate crime bill through executive order. Has specifically pledged allegiance to other groups. However, when it comes to black people specifically, literal interview with her saying out of her mouth she is not going to do anything specifically or only to benefit black people. But AIPAC doesn't benefit black people. Where? The $38 billion that she specifically supported to go towards the Iron Dome, how did that benefit black people? Where? How? So, but my point is that Ebro never approached that. The thing that he decided to focus on was this argument about her blackness. And I don't think that is unintentional, in other words. I think that it is my position, and as I stated, I don't have all the evidence to support it, but it's my belief that we are watching deep state actor propaganda tools being pushed out onto the public. I think this is an intention to circumvent even black male voters, to dissuade them, to jump on this sister girl politics that was being pushed and shoved down our throats in 2016, and black people largely just wasn't going for it. That's why Kamala dropped out of the race. That's why she never reached above a 2% approval rating in the early pollings with Cory Booker. But they are recycling those points as opposed to addressing a constituency in the seriousness at which they should be addressed. Black folks are talking about policies. What are you doing for our vote? We don't want to hear about the Chucks and Pearls. We don't care that you went to an HBCU. We do not care that you were born and raised in Oakland, that you had a Brahmin family. We do not care. What are the policy demands? Not universal, not the all tides, lift all boats policies, but what are you committing to do specifically for black people? And it is my opinion that we are watching a deep state agenda being played out, where both sides are being played out. I think it is not, in other words, this kind of dissuasion tactics that are specifically being targeted towards black male voters, specifically being targeted even at black women voters, to potentially galvanize this gender divide, where I think the simplistic thinking would be, well, clearly this is in support of Democratic Party. What I think we are watching happening in real time is a plan that doesn't particularly pick a side. In other words, that the easy thinking is that Democrats are trying to shame black male voters into voting Democrat. In other words, and trying to dissuade them from voting for Trump. I think that we are looking at, in other words, instead of two parties pitting against each other, I think we are looking at a deep state agenda that is fanning the flames of division. So no matter which side of the aisle you're on, the point is that you are on a particular side that is in opposition of the other side.
Yeah,
that is what I think we are, that we're watching happening in real time. And because as long as you are, yelling about Trump, as long as you're yelling about Kamala, what you are missing is the fact that cop cities are continuing to be built. That we have that we have a judiciary that is stripping rights in real time that have long been fought for. I think as long as we're yelling across aisles, that we continue to miss that our politicians are at this point corporately owned. I think we continue to miss that effectively there is very little government, and that we are really part and parcel of a corporatocracy. We are part and parcel of a surveillance state. We are part and parcel of consumerism to the point that it has led to total distraction. So long as we continue to yell, whether it's identity politics, whether it is even single voter issues, the point is that we are spending our time and resources as constituents being divisive, and I think that is the bigger point that's being played out. And even the shooter, I think, in a lot of ways, is a part of that. I find it particularly interesting that you find a 20-year-old without any social media, no friends, very little extended family to speak of, very little relationships. Both his parents are psychologists, and yet not one parent saw his radicalizing. This is an expendable individual. Who misses him? What friend group misses this individual? I don't think that that's a coincidence that you have. Like, how many folks would identify as loners out there? I don't think that it's enough to be a loner. I don't think it's enough to be an introvert. But to find a young individual that has virtually no known attachments, to me, the first thing when I heard that, the first thing I thought that this is an expendable individual. This was an individual who is particularly susceptible. Who is the voice of reason in his life? In other words, when he begins going down, whether it's the YouTube rabbit hole or an in-person rabbit hole, right? Being, if we think back to the COINTELPRO days of the Cold War as well, 40s, 50s, 60s, where pre-CIA, the OSS, radicalized people on campuses, radicalized people through professors, radicalized people in person, right? But the difference is that you typically wanted to identify folks that didn't have a balance of voice in their life. Where was this child's balance? Who was his sounding board to say, hey, I met this individual, I met this girl, I met this man, I met this person who seems like a friend. They're, introducing me to particular material, particular readings, and here's what I'm thinking. Here's the messaging. He just even as a friend does, right? When you discover new things, and what's your first inclination? Oh, you want to share it with the people that, are in your circle, right? You want to have those conversations. Who were the people in his life that he was having conversations with? And I don't think that it's coincidental that this particular individual, out of nearly 400 million people in the country, you find a 20-year-old that has no attachments, no one in his life that he trusts enough to have these conversations with about what he's thinking, what he's feeling, right? The way he feels about where the country is going, his prospects for the future. So much so that he gets a clear line of sight of a president 150 yards away. That's what we're talking, 150 yards away. That's practice. Literally.
Well,
that
I think
is sniper practice.
Yeah, I
So
think he was.
yeah, just I think you see where I'm going with it, but
Yeah, I think he was. I think. I
again,
think
that's my conjecture.
I think the most logical choice is that he was probably radicalized by his father. It was his father's gun that he took. The parents aren't really saying anything, but he was definitely radicalized by somebody. He hasn't been on this earth long enough to really have an opinion. He reminds me a lot of the guy who shut up Emmanuel Baptist Church. Same profile, young white guy who was radicalized by an older guy, and talking about
Dylan.
things that he could possibly know about. So
Dylan,
the same
Roof,
profile.
right?
Yeah, it seems like the same profile of Dylan Roof, the guy who shot Emmanuel. But I guess more
Well,
of
he
that stuff
had,
will come
so
up. I think
interesting you bring that up. He had friends though, Dylan Roof. So if you recall,
Yeah,
Dylan
he only had a couple. He only had
friends.
He only had a couple. Only had a few friends. He wasn't like real. I don't think he was real popular. But
Right.
the older guy. It was the older guy that
No,
had
he
been talking
wasn't, but
to.
but he still had a few friends.
Right.
This gentleman had zero friends that we're being told about.
Right. I think
certainly leave the space open for, are we being given all of the information, and is the information that we're ultimately being given completely accurate?
I would bet he was radicalized by his dad. That'd be my guess. It was his dad's gun that he took. I think the parents already called the police and said their son was missing. They were concerned about him a few hours before the event. But anyway, I guess more that would come out. But the one thing I was we only got a couple minutes left, but quickly, one thing I was thinking was like, if they can do this to Trump, they can do this to anybody. Like, who's next? If someone decides they don't like you, they don't like your messaging, you're saying something that certain powers that be don't like. You're speaking the truth, and you can't be bought off. You can't be. People just can't tell you anything. You can think for yourself, and all of a sudden you're getting an audience. I mean, who's next? That's my question. I mean, they can do it to Trump. Can they do this to anybody? Whether it's attack them physically, silence them, send different agencies after them, the courts, or other government agencies after a certain person if they don't like this person. Who's next, Mr. Mitchell? Can this happen to anybody?
No, I think
anybody?
yeah. I mean, frankly, anybody can be touched, right? We have witnessed that, even with Nancy Pelosi's husband, with the attack on the Michigan governor a few years ago, political violence, and beyond the statements of stamping out political violence. It is. I've often said, and I continue to stand on that square. A government should be afraid of its people. Full stop. A government should be afraid of its people. That is the check and balance. When you elect these individuals to represent your interest, your community's interest, and that elected official is doing things in opposition of that community's interest, progress, or certainly harming the same community that they voted in, should they be strung up? I'm certainly not advocating for that, but should they fear that their constituents are going to get them up out of there? Absolutely. 1,000%. And so I do continue to stand on that square, that a government should be afraid of its people. I think, and I've said it before, and I continue to say it, we are watching a government that is no longer, and for a very long time, is no longer afraid of its constituents. I pointed to that when Biden, in the face of the largest protests in recorded human history, which was the BLM protests between the AP News and New York Times, the lowest numbers that they had of participants, and total number of participants, was about 200 million people have participated in BLM protests. And that's irrespective of gender, That's irrespective of race. That's irrespective of class. Now, my point is not that it was BLM specifically. My point is that you had a collection of people, of constituents, that were specifically articulating these are the things that we do not want from our government and putting demands on the government. And Biden stood in front of those same constituents and specifically stated, not only am I not going to agree and bend to the messaging and the demands of these constituents, I'm going to do the exact opposite thing. The only thing, and I've said it numerous times before, I couldn't tell you what Biden ever promised beyond getting Trump out. But the one thing that he did say is that not only is he not going to defund the police, which is a primary tenet of the BLM protests, was to defund police. He said, not only am I not going to defund police, I'm going to increase the funding for police. And to me, that should have scared the crap out of the constituents. Because again, whether you agree, I don't care about the point of defunding the police. Whether you agree with the point, whether you don't agree, argue with your mama. I don't care. The bigger point, the bigger issue is that you had a politician, an elected, and at that point, he's not elected, but a person that is demanding your vote and telling you in exchange for your vote, he's going to ignore you and do the thing that is most beneficial for whom? Not for the constituents, not for the 200 million people that were on the ground. It was to the benefit of who then? Your corporate donors. It was for the benefit of who? The folks that are behind the scenes in the government. The deep state. At least, of course, if we are truly a democracy, which is a naive take at this point, we are a republic by its very nature. But let's say we take on that socialized, that we've been socialized to believe this is a democracy, that we vote our elected officials in. Okay, if I'm going to take that elementary school view, well, then you're telling me that this person is standing in front of me and saying that my vote and my voice, because that's what the vote represents, is useless, is worthless, because they're going to do what they want to do. And to me, that was the biggest issue with that so many people, whether it was the New York Times, whether it was independent publications, corporate media across the board ignored that you had a candidate that was running for president telling you what he wasn't going to do for you, and no one was saying, hey, this is a problem. You know what I mean? We have a deep state here that is clearly, or a corporatocracy that is clearly running its own agenda and is not afraid of its people. And that's a problem. That is the biggest problem. And I think that is why we are where we are politically and economically, because too many individual and small group interests are at play for the larger population at hand, and it does not fear the consequences of the population whatsoever. And that is a
fair
problem.
point. Fair point. I mean, particularly when it comes to black folks, when you talk about the Negro whispers who say the craziest stuff with no fear of reprisal, because you never see these people. You're never going to see them in a black neighborhood. But as far as Trump's concerned, if we allow this to happen to Donald Trump, it could happen to any one of us. So I think the country needs to fight back. Individuals need to
100%.
fight back. If you have a different voice, or you have something to say that people don't like, if you're saying something that people listen to you and you gain a following, you could be next. The DA could be investigating you for something next, or the IRS or some other government agency that the government used to weaponize itself against African Americans, and particularly sensitive African Americans should be sensitive too, because of all the ways that they've used government agencies to attack us, attack our leaders, and discriminate against us. So I think we need to fight back and send a message. I think one big message would be to re-elect Donald Trump. But that's my take. So that's Trump and the G. Is that Trump or John Wayne? I'm still not sure. But anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you.